Hi, and welcome to the fourth video in our C# for Beginner tutorial series. So in the last few videos, we've gone over variables and just simply how to set up a project and how to launch our projects. So today we're going to be taking a look at operators that we can use on our variables. And we're going to be using these operators probably throughout our whole programming career for different types of operations. So let's actually go ahead and let's get started by just creating our new project. So this should be pretty simple by now. So we're just going to be picking a C# console app. I'm going to be clicking on next, and we're just going to be naming this one operators. And we are going to be clicking on next and then clicking on create here. So this will bring us into our console application. So we are just going to erase everything here. So what I'm first going to start off by doing is I will actually start by creating um, 4 different variables. So I'm going to create one a integer, and we're going to name this one number 1, and I'm going to make this equal to 1. We're going to do a, actually we're going to lowercase that for just the proper naming format. And then int number 2, we are going to set that equal to 10. And let's go ahead and do an int number 3, and we're going to set that equal to -2. And let's do one final one, which is going to be our int results. And we're going to not make that equal to anything. We're going to be using that throughout the video to hold our results. And then one last thing that we're going to do that we've seen in the last video, we are actually going to output all these numbers to the console. So we're going to do a console.writeLine, and we are actually going to use the string interpolation method. So we are going to be using our $sign and our double quotes here, and we're just going to write number 1 and then colon. And let's do our curly braces, number 1, and then we'll do our escape character here, and then we're going to do number 2, and then once again curly brackets, number 2, and then our escape character, and then an N for a new line, and number 3. We're going to set that to number 3. Perfect. So that should be good. So now if we just do at the end here, we're just going to do a console.read key just to make the console window look a little bit nicer. So if we look at this here, and based on what I've seen in the last videos, it doesn't seem like I really need to zoom in for you guys. So you guys should be able to see this pretty good. So here we see our number 1, which is 1, number 2, which is 2, and number 3, which is -2. And we did that all in one line simply by using the string interpolation and some string formatting with our escape characters with the \n. So let's actually get started with the operators. So a lot of these operators you probably have already seen in school and probably already used them a bunch of time in your everyday life, depending on your job. And if you're a student, you're probably using these very regularly, depending on your program that you are in. But they're going to be these standard operators. So these are going to be your addition, your subtraction, your multiplication, your division. And then there's one that you probably haven't really used unless you've programmed before, and that is going to be the modulo operator. So let's go ahead and let's go over all of those. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to do a result equals number 1 plus number 2. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a console.writeLine, and we're going to do again a string interpolation for all of these. That is my preferred method. Again, you guys can use any of the methods that we went over in our last video when we looked at the different string manipulations. So let's just go ahead and let's just say number 1 plus number 2, and we're not going to put these in curly brackets. I just kind of want to simply say reference number 1, number 2 at the top, and then we are going to make that. So we're going to make that equal to, and then we're going to give our results. And let's end our line. So if we run this here, we are going to see number 1 plus number 2 equals 11, which makes sense. Number 1 is 1, number 2 is 10, and we see that we get 11. Now, of course, you could do it this way. Just make sure that your case is properly formatted. So number 2 plus number 1. You could do it this way. By all means, definitely feel free to format it any way that you would really want. We're actually going to use it this way. It might just be easier just for everyone to kind of see where we are on the screen and see what where the numbers are coming from. All right, so we've done our addition. So what I'm going to do is I'm just actually going to copy paste this a few more times here. So let's look at, I'm actually just going to make one at a time. So let's look at our subtraction operator. So this is once again pretty straightforward. It'll be number 1 minus number 2 and give us our result. We can see that we do get minus 9. 1 minus 10 is minus 9. And if we go again and do our multiplication, and let's take a look at that, we get 1 times 10, which is going to be 10. And the multiplication, if you've used other programming languages, it is usually always the little asterisk there, asterisk or a star, depending on how you want to call it. And then our before last is going to be a division. Now, because we are using integers, this division is going to have a very, very similar effect to when you probably did long division way back in grade school, where you're dividing into whole numbers. So for us, 1 divided by 10, we might be quick to say that it'll be 0.1, because 0.1 goes into 1 10 times. But when you're dealing with only integers, we don't get those decimal values as we've seen in the last video. So it'll actually round, and in this case, we will see that it gives us 0. So 1 divided by 10 is 0. But as we know, with long division, we always have a remainder. And this is where the modulo operator comes in. So the modulo operator is actually the percent sign. So number 1 percent sign number 2. So that means number 1 modulo number 2. And in like the grand scheme of things, it means what is the remainder of number 1 divided by number 2. So if we divide 1 by 10, it is 0, but there is a remainder of 1. So let's actually go see if that's what it gives us. And it does. So 1 modulo 10 is equal to 1. So that is perfect. So these are our very standard operators that we've probably all seen before, like I said, except for the modulo, but you have seen it most likely in real life before with a long division. It just might have been a very, very long time since you have seen long division. I know myself, I really do not use long division at all anymore, unless I am writing programs that require it. So then we will have some unary operators. So those are single operators that you can put in front of a variable to perform a operation on a variable. So a very simple version of that would actually be adding a negative in front of a number. So what we can actually do here is do a console dot writeLine, and let's say again our string with our $sign in front of it. A negative number 1 is going to be, and let's put our curly brackets and let's put our negative symbol and then number 1. So if we do a negative number 1, it should give us negative 1, and it does. But now let's say we wanted to do a negative number 3, which is already equal to negative 2. What would that give us? So if we do a negative number 3 and a negative number 3, and I'll just give you guys a few seconds before I actually run the program to see what that gives us. That actually gives us 2. So if we take a negative of a negative, kind of like a multiplication. If we multiply two negatives together, it'll make it positive. So if we do negative, negative 2, that actually basically means negative 1 times negative 2, making it positive 2. So whenever you do a little negative there, it's pretty much just saying minus 1 times whatever this value is. So it's going to give us the negative value of this value, and a negative of a negative becomes a positive. All right, and then there is one more type of unary operators, which is actually going to be performed on Booleans in this case. So let's create a Boolean here. And let's create our Boolean as is awesome. And we're going to make that equal to false for now. So this variable is not awesome at all. And then if we do a console.writeLine, and again, we're going to do our string here. We're going to do is awesome is, and then we're just going to put the is awesome. So we're just putting the variable directly into it. Just to make sure that we see it properly. So we see is awesome is false. And now if we add a exclamation mark in front of is awesome, that will actually negate the is awesome. So let's just make sure is awesome is true. So this exclamation mark is also known as the not operator. So not is awesome, and since is awesome is false, it again does a negative of a negative, making it a positive. So if we put this to true, it will actually make it false. So this will always just kind of flip from true to false or from false to true. Perfect. So those covers the unary operators, which I believe that you will probably use the not operator quite a lot in comparison to the negative operator for the unary operators. So our next one is going to be the increment and decrement operators. Now, these are going to be mostly used during loops, and we're going to be seeing loops very, very soon. But there's also there's two ways of showing and performing these increment and decrement operators, and sometimes they could be a little tricky. So we're going to be breaking them down for you guys. So we're going to be using our number 1 variable here. So we're going to be starting at 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a console.writeLine, and we're going to just be doing a string interpolation. Number 1 is currently, and we are going to do number 1. So right now, we know that our number 1 is currently 1. So now if we do a console.writeLine, and we do a string, and then we do let's do a post increment on number 1. And then that'll be number 1 plus plus. So a post increment is putting our plus plus after our variable, which will increase it by 1. But if I actually run this here, we are going to see that it is still 1. But you just said that we are going to be incrementing it by 1. But in this case, because it is a post increment, we will actually be showing the value of the variable first and then incrementing it after the line is complete. So now if I actually do a console.writeLine, actually I'm just going to copy this line, we are going to see that it is actually now 2 after that line. Now the other version of the increment is a pre-increment. So let's do a console.writeLine, and then let's do a pre-increment on number 1. And that is going to be plus plus number 1. And now if we run this here, we are going to see pre-increment on number 1 is now 3. So this actually executes the increment before the actual line, before we actually treat the variable. So we're going to be increasing number 1 by 1 and then displaying it. Whereas in our post increment, we are going to be displaying our variable and then incrementing it. And now we have the exact same examples with decrements. So let's do our console.writeLine. And once again, we're going to be using number 1 in this case. So number 1, actually, I'm just going to copy this line here. Number 1 is currently, and we see number 1 is currently free. So let's do a post decrement first. So a post decrement on number 1, which is going to be number 1, and this is negative, negative. So it's going to subtract 1. And if we run that, once again, we still see that it is free, because just as the same as the post increment, the post decrement is after. So if we display the number 1 now, we will see that it is actually 2. And then if we do a pre-decrement, so console.writeLine, and pre-decrement on number 1, and negative, negative, number 1. So we are performing our number 1 minus 1 before the line, and we are already down to 1. So those are the differences between increments and decrement operators. There are 2 ways to use them. I would say the majority of times we're probably going to be using the post increment, but there might be times where you might need a pre-increment depending on the application. But for the most part, the post increments are probably what you're going to be doing, unless you are displaying a score or something where you might want the pre-increments, again, depending on how your application is going to be coded. But for loops, post increments are going to be the majority of the time what we're going to be using. All right, perfect. Now we have our relational operators. Now you have probably seen these before as well in school. This is going to be your greater than, your equal, your greater than, your lesser than, and technically also your equal than, which is more, instead of a relational, more of an equality operator. So let's actually take a look at those. So let's do a Boolean here. We're going to do a cond result. Actually, let's do a bool is less. And then we're going to do is less equal to number 1 is less than number 2. And then we're going to do a console.writeLine. And let's put our string here, and let's just do number 1 is less than number 2, question mark, and let's put our is less here. So if we run this here, we're going to see 1 is less than 10 is true. So that is perfect. And then we're going to have our greater than operator. Let's do a bool is greater, and is greater equal to number 1 is greater than number 2. So this, of course, should give us false because we already know that it's lesser than. If we do our right line here, we're going to do our string. We're going to do number 1 is greater than number 2, question mark, and is greater. So if we run this, we're going to see 1 is greater than 10, and that is false. We have one more here, which is going to be our bool is equal. And then that we can say is equal to number 1. Now to check equality it is actually very important to make sure that you always have a double equals sign, then number 2. The single equal sign is for variable assignment or an assignment of some sort. And then the double equals is to check equality. And then we're going to do a console dot write line. And let's do number 1 is equal to number 2. That is equal, and 1 is equal to 10 is false. Now, of course, I haven't shown these, but these are also valid. You can add equal signs to any of these to do an is lesser than or equals or greater than and equals to. So those are all extra checks that you can add into your applications to check if number 1 is less than or greater to number 2, or number 1 is greater than or equal to number 2. And then we also have another check that we can do, which is bool is not equal. So is not equal equals number 1, number 1, and then the not operator equals number 2. And then we're going to just copy this line here. So we have our console write line. Number 1 is not equal to number 2 is not equal. We're going to see that that 1 is not equal to 10 is true. All right, perfect. So let's go into our last type of operators, and these are going to be conditional operators. These are going to be probably also widely used in your if statements later on, or switch statements. These are also more commonly to compare multiple different conditions, which is why they are conditional operators. So we're just going to write conditional operators. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to create again a bool, and we're going to do a cond result here. And we're going to do cond result is going to be equal to, let's do is not equal. And we're going to do 2 ampersand signs for the and. And we're going to do is awesome. All right, and then we're going to say console dot write line is not equal and is awesome question mark. And we're going to do cond result. Let's see what that gives us. So that gives us true. And the reason for that is the not equal was set to true, and the is awesome is actually set to true at the top here. So that gives us true. Now for the ands, instead of trying to pick all the different options, what I'm going to show you guys is I'm going to show you the truth table for the and operator. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a console.write line. And then we're going to do our string, our interpolated string. And we're going to do true, and true is going to be equal to. And then here we're going to do true, ampersand, ampersand, and true. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy this line 4 times. You really only need to do it 3 times, but we're going to do it 4 times just to show you guys all the different possibilities. So here we have true and true, true and false, false and true, and then the last one is false and false. So if we run this here, we will get true and true is true, true and false is false, false and true is false, and false is equal to false. So the only time that an and condition is true is if both statements are true. And in this case, the is not equal and is awesome. They were both true, so it came back out to true. We're just going to put and up here. And now we have our OR operator. So if we do our OR here, and let's do a example. So cond result is equal to is equal or so just a pipe and a pipe for the or, and we're gonna say is equal and is awesome, and we're gonna do is console dot write line. Let's do our string literal here. So let's do is equal or is awesome question mark and con results. We are going to see that this gives us the value of true, and that's because is equal is false, but or is awesome is true. Now, our truth table for our or statements is going to be quite different. So we're going to change all the ands to ors here. And we are going to go ahead and change all the ands to ors in our variable here. Oops. So if we run this, we are going to see that true or true is true, true or false is true, false or true is true, and false or false is false. So the only time that an OR operation can be false is if both statements are false. Besides that, it is always going to come back to true. So those are your two truth tables, and just knowing the truth tables is very, very handy. This way you could more accurately predict and more accurately build your conditions in your if statements, because you can definitely nest a whole bunch of these. We're going to be going over a little bit more in that in detail in our if statements, but these are a bunch of the operators that you can perform in C#, and definitely the more common ones that you'll be using in your applications. So if you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave a comment down below. If you guys have any topics that you would like me to cover in C#, please let me know down below. If you have any questions or a topic on a video that I think that a lot of people would benefit from, I would definitely make a video on it. If it's a little bit more specific, I'll answer you directly. And also be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and also make sure to hit the notification bell to be notified when the next video comes out. And I will see you guys on the next video.